Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 14, Episode 143. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Monday, Steelers Nation. The Pittsburgh Steelers will begin their three-day mandatory minicamp beginning on Tuesday, running Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But until then, Dave, on this Monday, pretty quiet weekend overall. How you doing?
Yeah, doing absolutely fine. It will be interesting to see them go through this three-day mandatory mini camp, start putting everything together with all the, with the installs up until this point and kind of making it a primer for, obviously, for the start of training camp, which I guess now about, 5-6 weeks away. And man, it's 90 days from today until the Steelers play the Falcons in week 1. So it's closer than you think there. So we have a little bit, I guess, to keep us busy today, and we'll see what happens, obviously, with mandatory minicamp and you know what kind of things we have to talk about on Wednesday. But man, you get past this week and you start get into those 5 weeks of absolutely nothing. So enjoy it while we still have football and shorts going on.
Yeah, we may end up going to the two-week podcast version, which feels like that timeline gets extended each year because the NFL does a really good job of having the news cycle constantly churn out information. This is about the only dead time of the year after OT or after minicamp wraps up this weekend. I know it's not going to be just quite yet, but your 90 and 30 series should be coming up here pretty soon, right?
Yeah, I suppose that's right. We'll go through all the players on the 90-man roster and a little kind of where have they been and where they might be going kind of thing. Usually hit on, I think, about 3 players a day with that. So yeah, that'll be coming up here. Yeah, we usually start that about 30 days out. I might start a little bit earlier this year, but I like to get about 3 players knocked out in a post each day. So that'll be keeping me busy coming up. We'll see how much the 90-man roster changes even between now and when that starts. And not only that, as I go through that, usually the 90 that I profile don't end up being the 90 right at the start of camp. It ends up being probably about 92, 93 different players, I guess, in whole.
Sure, but I always enjoy that series as a good primer to get myself and to get fans ready for training camp. I guess it'll technically be 91 and 30, right? Because they're sitting there 91 with the exception, the international exemption, and Julius Wolshoff.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't have the same kind of ring to it, does it?
It does not. It does not. Anyway, all right, Dave, again, pretty light show here today. We'll find some new topics, new ground to cover. Arthur Smith sat down with Missi Matthews at some point last week or so, interview posted on Monday. I think we'll hear from Smith and the coaching staff during minicamp as well, which will be really interesting to get their thoughts. We haven't heard from most of that group in quite some time. Nothing earth-shattering as you would expect from Arthur Smith. Was asked about, do you plan on having a specific package for Justin Fields? But of course, without even Russell Wilson being anointed or cemented as a starter, this team's not going to talk about, backup packages for Justin Fields. And so Smith called it too early to have those discussions, but praised both Wilson and Fields and the job they've done, the professionalism, and just kind of, overall being good fits in this offense.
Yeah, as you would expect, you're not going to get a lot out of offensive coordinator or coach in general, especially this time of year. He wasn't willing to spill the beans on anything monumental. I thought it was interesting to hear him talk about both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields kind of early on in the interview when he was asked how they specifically fit into his style offense. And he goes on to say they're really good play extenders, and they certainly could change the launch points, which gives you an advantage, he says. They're not just sitting there as a statue in the pocket. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit. I mean, it's not earth-shattering news there, but kind of an affirmation of kind of things that we've seen on tape that everybody have seen. Kind of what those two quarterbacks are at their root. They are play extenders to some degree, and obviously both can fling the football down the field quite a ways as well too.
Yeah, so we'll have to get eyes on them in training camp, but reports on both men so far during OTAs have been good, as you would expect. They're both talented. I still think, and I know some of the beat guys that have been at OTAs say that Russell Wilson still looks like he has the same arm talent, and physically, in terms of just arm strength, accuracy, that all looks the same from where it's been throughout his career. Mobility, I'm sure, has declined to some degree, but he can still, as you said, as Smith said, change the launch point, be able to boot and extend the play when he has to. So I think, it's no surprise to hear that Fields and Wilson are looking good because they are really physically talented quarterbacks who should look good in an open environment like this.
Yeah, look, if there's things to be excited about specifically with Russell Wilson, I mean, his arm strength and being able to throw the football down the field. I mean, you just go back to last year and look at some of his highlights when it comes to that. This team desperately needs to be able to throw the football down the field more than 16 yards past the line of scrimmage and complete those and compile some explosive plays that way. On top of it, we last year in particular, we've seen Russ be able to complete more of the shorter passes. I mean, the super short passes, the ones within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage, and obviously a lot of them behind the line of scrimmage. I think the big onus on him and what can make this Steelers offense marginally better is how Russell Wilson can do with throws beyond that 5 yard mark on the field and up until the 16 yard mark on the field. Those more intermediate throws and kind of specifically more to the middle of the field kind of area. If he can make a significant impact when it comes to his play and those kind of throws, I think that's the thing that can tip a lot of games potentially in the Steelers' favor. Once again, we know he can complete the short throws. We know he can complete the screen game. I think there will be moments where we'll see, that's a Russell Wilson that we expect to see when it comes to throwing the football down the field, whether it be down the middle of the field or down the sidelines when you're talking about further down the field. I'm real excited to see how he can help this team once again in that intermediate passing area. And one thing that we've talked about, you've had the stats about and talked about is can they limit those sacks, those negative plays with Russel Wilson and really Justin Fields for that matter, should he have to get in there. But, obviously with this thing pointing towards Russell Wilson, can he eliminate a percentage of those negative plays where he's either extending the play and gets sacked, or he's extending the play and he loses the football, or he throws the interception? Obviously didn't throw a lot of interceptions last year, but when you stack those on to those sacks and the fumbles and all like that, you don't need them. So, I think Russell Wilson can still play in this league. It's just, can he limit a lot of the negative things that we've seen these last couple of years when it comes to him? And can he make an impact in little situations in this game, specifically kind of in that intermediate passing game? And if he's able to do that, will play a big part in whether or not the Steelers offense can take the next step.
I agree. And our Clayton Eckert has put together some really good data that illustrates he was very check down heavy last year, but also pretty heavy throwing the ball 20 plus air yards downfield. Is there a concern because we've had these conversations about the Steelers offense before. I think back to even really most notably 2021 with Ben. And in the end of Ben's career, he was either check it short to the running back or, heave it downfield vertically outside the numbers. And middle of the field's always been that kind of vacant desert the last several seasons. Look at some of the numbers. Is there a worry that Wilson's style is similar to that and will create the similar issues this offense has been bothered by and hindered by in years past?
Sure. You kind of do wonder if you get kind of that late but fine, late but winnable with Ben Roethlisberger, right? Where it was a lot of shorter type stuff mixed in with if the age old thing of Ben saw you kind of press a guy on the outside and didn't see anything help over top. He didn't care if it was third and inches, fourth and inches, or what. He was going to give his guy a chance to win on the outside, such as that. So I think there is a little bit of that concern when it comes to Russell Wilson. Is he all, is he a quarterback that's either all outside the numbers down the field, or is he going to be one that only takes that, 3 yards or less down the field kind of check down situation? And you look back at it once again at his numbers, specifically the last couple of years, he's had a lot of those completions, very, very short ones mixed in with kind of the longer ones. It will be interesting to see if he can impact, because that's where a lot of the games won at times, is that's where you can create other explosive plays, or kind of those passes that you complete 7-8 yards down the field that you get the yak on, that move the chains there. So it is a concern. Can you win with that old style or the late older style play of Ben Roethlisberger? I mean, we saw the Steelers win with it that way. Obviously, you're going to have to be able to run the football and not turn the football over and get help from the defense and all like that. You can win that way, but I mean, to make it a little bit easier on the offense, you do need more of that middle of the field, intermediate type stuff.
Sure. No, I agree. You just want to utilize the entire field. Teams that are able to do that horizontally and vertically are typically the most efficient offenses, because they can win in any way, then they can adjust to whatever the defensive game plan and strength of that opposing unit is. I know the narrative on Wilson has been that he doesn't like to throw over the middle. I wonder how true that is. I mean, I know in Denver the numbers were pretty light, but I just think about how that Broncos offense was constructed. They traded Noah Fant as part of the Wilson deal. That was their star tight end who made some plays against Pittsburgh, for example. And I don't know if they really ever had super quality tight ends in the last couple of years. They tried to draft some guys that didn't work out. And when you have Sutton and Judy on the outside in Denver, of course, you're going to throw it, outside the numbers, because those are your best guys. And then in Seattle, you had Jimmy Graham, who put a couple of big years over there. I don't know how much in terms of where that was at relation outside the numbers, vertically, seam stuff. But Jimmy Graham is a tight end that's had success in an offense led by Russell Wilson, and so I think that Wilson is capable of it. I think his accuracy is there. Some could argue that he doesn't want to throw over the middle because he can't see it as well because of the height issue, and we can debate that. But hopefully, we'll see Wilson be able to utilize the entire field, especially in this Arthur Smith offense that is so tight end heavy and centric. And given that Pittsburgh really doesn't have a lot of proven commodities outside of George Pickens, and they got a bunch of guys at tight end to target.
Well, and on top of that is something that we've talked about since both really him and Justin Fields joined his team, is there's probably going to be an onus to get the football out of their hands quicker too, right? So
right.
Both of them have a kind of a tendency to hold on to those onto those footballs. So how thoughtfully rhythmic do you want them to be? But you can still get that done in the middle of the field, though. With in certain down distances situations, obviously with the quick slants and with the with some of the mesh stuff, and I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of stuff with deeper digs overall that take a little bit of time to develop, where you get some of those kind of like dagger concepts and all like that rely on the quarterback holding the football a little bit more within them. I mean, obviously we'd all like to see that, but I don't think you're going to see a ton of it with these two quarterbacks here. And once again, I mean, Russell's getting up in age, and you got to think about not making him, kind of lessening the amount of hits on him almost in the same fashion that, they did with Ben back when Todd Haley came in, right?
Right.
So I think at its core, it's probably going to be more of a shorter passing game, average yards per or yards per completed down, down at distance of yards completed downfield, and average intended yards. But on the flip side, you do have a quarterback in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, for that matter. Those guys can sling it, man. I mean, they still can put the football 50 yards in the air down the field.
How do you think, and you kind of touched on it some, but expand if you could, how do you try to compel and get, let's assume Wilson is the starter, to throw over the middle more? Is that, besides just calling more routes there, obviously, how do you kind of maybe convince him to throw there more often than he has the past 2 years?
I mean, that's $1 million. I mean, that's $1 million question, right?
I think play action will be that staple where you can, run some stuff off of that, glance routes and stuff down the seam, get behind a linebacker, and then just, of course, being a heavy personnel team may just lend itself if you got a couple of tight ends out there.
Well, yeah, look, we hope, just as fans of the Steelers, we see more play action this year out of this offense, and I think we will. And I think play action, especially if this team is able to run the football like they're, we've said it how many times. Everything this team wants to do offensively is going to be predicated on how successful they are running the football. If you're constantly in second and third and long type situations because inabilities to run the football on early downs, it's going to take away a lot of what you want to do offensively, especially with both of your quarterbacks. Put them in unfortunate situations on top of it there. So. Yeah, I mean, and plus when you add the element of play action, there's a lot more, what you would hope would be rhythmic passing game within that. So that would be predicated to more of the between the numbers type stuff around that 7 to 8 yard down the field, and those kind of play action type situations too, especially early down situations. If you get yourself into a unpredictable down for the defense, like a 2nd and 4, that's when you can rely on play action to open up those deeper dagger concepts, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. So that'll be his mission. Can you scheme some stuff open to kind of give Wilson some easy wins over the middle to kind of get into that rhythm, as you said, of throwing in that real estate? I think he's capable of doing it. I think the narrative is probably a little too hard that he's anti over the middle. I think there's a lot of explanations and reasons for why those numbers were down the past couple of years. I watch him on tape. I think he's made some plays over the middle before. If the talent is there, if you can scheme it up properly, he will do it. I don't have as big a concern as some of the pundits more nationally have spoken about, but certainly play action that opens some things up. And if you get some stacks and bunches and some free releases to get guys over the middle, some yak opportunities, that'll probably encourage Wilson a little bit more to throw there. And again, I think just the construct of this offense, when you're going to be in a bunch of 12 personnel, that's going to be the real estate these tight ends sit in between the numbers. And so I think it just kind of naturally lends itself to Wilson doing that more than he has the last 2 years in Denver.
I mean, he's, obviously quarterback plays a big part in this thing moving forward. And not only winning games in the NFL, but be able to go further into the playoffs. And, but within that, you just can't add Wilson to this and not think that you need to support him without the running game, obviously there. Sure. So, myself, I would like to see, and I think you as well would like to see a better option as a second wide receiver for this team. But and even with us expecting them to run more, 2-3 tight end type situations here, they can obviously win with the personnel they have under contract right now. But so many things, you're relying on health. overall, which obviously all teams are, but you don't have a huge margin for a guy like George Pickens should something happen to him, right? And on top of it, you got to help the quarterback out by being able to run the football successfully. And that's not a shock, especially the way this thing is built right now with this team, with what this team did in the draft, with the offensive coordinator that they have now, obviously with an older quarterback with Russell Wilson. You have to do everything right on offense to help Russ be that next level quarterback at this stage in his career.
I agree. And some will say, oh, it's a quarterback friendly system, and they'll use that as a negative, as a pejorative or something like that. And no, every offense has to be a quarterback friendly offense, no matter who your quarterback is. You need to lean on the strengths of your quarterback and minimize his weaknesses and play to his style of game overall. But there are going to be some tweakings and some adjustments needed with Wilson to maximize him and for this offense to be as efficient as possible. And that's going to mean, utilizing all the space on the field horizontally and vertically. It's going to mean, reducing his snap to throw time a little bit, not sit at around 3 seconds, be at 2.75. I'm not expecting him to turn into what Ben became, where it was this lightning quick release, 2.4 seconds, fastest in football. That's not going to happen, nor should it. But there's going to have to be some sort of compromise and knowing when to kind of just, let the play go and fight another day, as opposed to trying to scrap for every single yard that does more harm than good. So that'll be Smith's challenge this year.
Yeah, and there's going to have to be instances with him where he's just going, like you said. I mean, how many times have we seen Russell Wilson try, especially in the last, let's say, 3 or 4 years here, try to make some of those plays, especially on some sacks right before the knee goes down or whatnot. He just kind of, flings that thing off into nowheres, man. There are going to be plays where he's just going to have to throw it away. Sometimes throwing the football away is not the worst option, in the world there. And here's the thing about Russell, right? He's a been there, done that quarterback. So he's taken a ton of snaps in the NFL. He's obviously had the highest level of success in the NFL as well too. And you look around the NFL at some of these teams, that have moved on from older quarterbacks and around the league. Some of them have still been able to have success, obviously, and even some of the younger ones as well too. What Goff was discarded, right? You look at what Kirk Cousins is able to been able to do. Older quarterbacks can still get it done in this league. Especially those with some experience, but you have to be able to have the rest of your offense play to the quarterback's strengths, and you still got to limit the kind of hero ball, if you will, right, when it comes to a guy like Russell Wilson in particular.
I don't have the data relative to other quarterbacks, and that's going to be needed to make any sort of a evaluation. But according to PFR, Wilson had 26 throwaways in 2023 and 32 throwaways in 2022. Again, I don't know where that sits across the rest of the NFL.
It's probably up there. I mean, because
seems so.
Yeah, you would think, but I mean, it's still okay to do that. But how many times did he not throw it away that he probably should have?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just trying to get some data since we're on the conversation. The numbers certainly seem to be elevated from his Seattle days, where he was kind of in the low 20s on more pass attempts. Also, looking at the numbers, maybe one reason why he hasn't thrown over the middle as often over the last 2 years, Dave, 30 passes have been batted by. That's got to be one of the top numbers in football. And again, the height's probably a concern there, being a 5'11" and change type of quarterback. But I remember on tape watching that. There were a couple games in particular, like 3-4, deflections by the D-line in a single game. So in Seattle, those numbers weren't even close. In 2021, he had 3 passes batted. In 2024, in 2019, 9, in 2018, 0, 2022 in Denver, 19, 2023 in Denver, 11 passes batted on fewer pass attempts in 2022. So that is a pretty striking number.
Yeah. It is. And those kind of things too, those kind of balls are the ones that, either they go down or they go up, right? when they get batted, and you hope the ones that go up in the air don't end up in the arms of another player there. So, but look, I mean, obviously, what are one of the things that we talked about immediately after the last season when Pickett was still on the roster, and the quarterback, we said the quarterback plays got to improve significantly, and this is long before we saw that they were going to move away from Pickett and really rebuild the whole entire quarterback room. But at least it feels like with the quarterback that they have now, they have more of a shot than what they would have had in the quarterback room had they rewound that thing with Pickett and pick one, Trubisky or Rudolph or what have you there. So especially, once again, you got a guy in Wilson that's been there and done that. You just got to limit a lot of the negativity that they've shown, and you've got to accentuate some of the positive that Sean Payton really maybe didn't want to try to do with Russell Wilson in those 2 years. Because look, it says a lot about a team willing to, especially with a coach like Sean Payton, willing to move on, and an organization willing to move on from a quarterback and pay him that kind of cash and have that kind of dead money in what kind of looks like a flat rebuild for them in the quarterback room for Denver, for them to have to move on from a guy like Russell Wilson like that. It says a lot about what they thought about what their vision was and what they think Russell Wilson is at this point in a career. Not that teams don't make mistakes, because Lord knows we've seen teams make mistakes and move on from quarterbacks way too early. But it does speak volumes when you're talking about a coach with that's had some good quarterbacks in his time in Sean Payton, right? For them to move on from a guy like Wilson. But sometimes, on top of it, it's hard to put the square peg in the round hole sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think there was a good and strong schematic fit. And, Peyton came in and inherited Wilson. He didn't voluntarily go out there and trade for him. That was before he got hired. So it was kind of that shotgun wedding, awkward fit, didn't work out. And I think maybe in Pittsburgh, it'll be a better and stronger schematic fit overall. But yeah, your point is valid. We made it before. They're paying him basically $40 million to not play for him. That's how much they did not want Russell Wilson to be their quarterback, is they're willing to pay him almost $40 million to go play for somebody else to play against them whenever these two teams meet in week number 2. So that's it's a thought certainly to consider about why they made this move, and a question of what Wilson has left. But none of that really matters right now. He's in Pittsburgh, and you take it from there. Just to put some quick numbers on this, just looking up the data here on the fly. Over the last 2 years, Wilson is 5th in the NFL in passes batted down by defenders at the line with 30. Ahead of him are Baker Mayfield with 36, a shorter quarterback as well. Justin Herbert is 2nd with 34, tied with Joe Burrow. Surprised to see those two guys on the list. And then Trevor Lawrence with 33. In terms of throwaways, Wilson is tied with Jalen Hurts for the most throwaways over the last 2 seasons with 58. Jared Goff is 3rd with 54. Josh Allen is 4th with 46. So he has been throwing the ball away a lot. But like you said, it's probably some particular situations where you wish he would have made a smarter play as opposed to the actual decision he did make.
All right.
So that's
we got all that out of what Arthur Smith said.
Yeah, we can do it. We're like a sponge. Just ring us out and we'll go. Smith, also, you mentioned the lack of a number 2 receiver and trying to acquire that. Smith was asked about that by Missi Matthews. Said it's constantly changing in terms of who that guy could be, and kind of just talked about it changes in general depending on injuries and his past experiences, is that can be an ever-evolving situation. So really didn't talk about this team situation, Pittsburgh's present situation too specifically, just talked about that you never kind of know who might step up and be the guy. So that kind of goes back to in my mind right now, on the present day roster, a truly open competition, and you put them out there in camp, let the best man win, and go from there.
Sure. And we've talked about that number 2 and will they or won't they when it comes to trades, and who of these kind of more or at least a little bit more experienced guys on the roster right now. If they stand pat with that room, is this going to be kind of by a committee type situation between, assuming all, several of them make the roster? How many in total will they keep in total in the wide receiver room? Obviously, you're going to have George Pickens in that room. Obviously, you're going to have Roman Wilson in that room. Beyond that, it's going to be interesting to kind of play out, especially if they only stand pat with the wide receivers that they have in the room right now at this point. You got a lot of question marks in guys like Van Jefferson and Quez Watkins and the Scotty Millers, and you might, and obviously Calvin Austin III. We still need to learn a lot more about him at this point. Are you going to have to see a lot of mix and match situationally, and that's a potential there on top of there. Look, go one final thing really on Russell Wilson. We've talked about this several times with him, especially if you look back at last year. I mean, Russell, got the job done for the most part inside the red zone with Denver last year. It's between the 20 or between the 40s, however you want to look at it, where you want to see, better play from him. And as you've highlighted several times, you got to, and we just talked about, got to limit the negative plays that kind of he creates himself, So it's, can he still win games in the NFL? The answer is yes. But you have to more tailor your stuff to what he is at this point right now.
No, I agree. There's going to have to be some sort of compromise where Wilson will have to adjust some. Arthur Smith, this offense will have to adjust some. But again, I think there is a pretty good mesh of what Wilson does well, what Arthur Smith wants to do well, working under center, play action, changing the launch point, which will help reduce the number of passes batted down and create some kind of freebies. And you can have good constraint plays. You work off variations of your boot game, which Smith does. So I like the marriage overall. We'll just see how things work. They since Pittsburgh has done a little bit of salary cap related stuff here. We know the official numbers on the contracts for cornerback Grayland Arnold, also Cam Sutton, and then of course Troy Fautanu signing his rookie deal about a week or so ago as well. Give us an update on the Steelers' state of the salary cap.
Yeah, they're still in a fine position, at least, from what we know that the directions, or what we think that we know about the direction that they may or may not take the rest of the offseason here. The Cam Sutton contract came in as a veteran benefit contract, probably not surprising considering his situation there. I mean, all we've seen primarily for the last couple of weeks here, a lot of these veteran benefit contracts, and that's the type of stuff that you do see at this time of the year. I mean, even going back to some of these kind of more veteran cornerbacks, the Everett's coming out of the rookie mini camp, and who else did they sign that was had a little bit veteran? Who was the other cornerback? I'm drawing a blank on.
Well, there was Averett. Did Averett get anything?
Right. No, it was just it was a minimum. It was a veteran salary benefit contract for him as well too. There, I think, with him. But overall, and then Grayland, he's obviously had some he's actually had more credit seasons than I thought, but that still works out to a veteran benefit contract, reduced salary cap charge with him. Where they sit right now, especially after Fautanu, is a little under 17 million in salary cap space. Right now, 16.997. We are still waiting on the Keelan Harris injury settlement, which probably only going to be about a 3-week charge on that. We'll probably know something about Luke Barku, who was waived injured. I think, beginning of last week with him. They're coming up on that 7 days where they'll probably have to make a decision on the injury settlement with him. It might be a while before we learn the injury settlement amounts on these guys. Obviously, you still have the workout bonus, off-season workout bonus charge that you have to account for. The NFL, for some reason, has stopped putting that, at least on the NFLPA side of things. They've stopped inserting that placeholder amount in. I think what they did last year is at the end, after mandatory minicamp was run, the NFL put the placeholder in on their side of the numbers, and then like 4 days later, when the real numbers come in of what players actually showed up and how many practices and how many hours and blah blah blah, then they immediately credited back the difference of the two. And it sounds like that's what's going to happen this year. At this point now, the Steelers only have one draft pick, obviously not under contract, and that is Zach Frazier. That's probably going to change this week, you would think, because of all these guys that are signing around Frazier. You got to account for almost $600,000 in cap space to go towards him. And then from that point forward, it's just all, what are the Steelers going to do with guys like Cameron Hayward? Are we going to see, what will the potential contract extension look like for Pat Freiermuth? Will they or won't they with Najee Harris? What will the Cam Hayward situation end up as? When you look even at it at its core right now, and the projected future salary cap expenses, like end of Rule 51 with the 52nd and 53rd player, with the practice squad, $4 million going towards that, with the in-season replacement fund, basically a slush fund. Will that be $5-6 million this year? Even looking at all that with stuff kind of even on the high side, if they really did nothing moving forward right now, they would still end up with nearly $2 million in salary cap space. So there's a lot of room to really work within that. And once again, we talked about, man, it seems like this team could stand to use to spend more cash this offseason, and they definitely will when it comes to specifically with the Pat Freiermuth contract, because you'll have a signing bonus involved with that. But even above and beyond that, it still feels like there's room to spend an additional, and once again, this assumes no new money in 2024 extension with Cameron Hayward. But even on top of that, and on top of a Pat Freiermuth contract extension, it still feels like there's the ability to spend another $13-15 million in cash, if not a little bit more, on this roster the rest of the way. Now, there's no rules that says that they have to spend that cash this year. I mean, this is the first year of the 3-year period in the CBA. They could be looking ahead and saying, man, we might have to ink one of these quarterbacks next year at big money and spend cash that way. We might decide to be a lot more active in the second year of this CBA when it comes to free agency and spend more cash that way. So there are a lot of different ways this thing could wind up going. And on top of that, you still look at the team's ability, at least from a caps perspective, of, well, if they get in a situation here, they could restructure the contract on Minkah Fitzpatrick and free up nearly another $9 million in cap space that way. Will they need to? I mean, that's something that we're not going to get a good handle on, of will they or won't they need to restructure the contract of Minkah Fitzpatrick until we see some of the directions that they go on here with guys like Cameron Hayward, or with guys like what will the extension look like with Freiermuth? Will they extend the contract of Najee Harris, along those lines? But I mean, in totality, the picture that's painted right now with the salary cap situation is absolutely fine. That's the long and short of it. Once again, they could do nothing moving forward, and at least with the projected future salary cap cost coming from this point of when mandatory minicamp ends to week 1 of the regular season, they could do absolutely nothing and still look like they'll end up being nearly $2 million under the cap. On top of having that additional $6 million at the start of the season, those kind of things.
Just hypothetically, could they trade for an Alec Pierce or a Treylon Burks and not have to make any other cap restructuring type moves to free up space? Do you know the math and the numbers on that? Pierce, I imagine, probably because he was a later round pick, or at least a little bit later than Burks, who was a first round guy. But I just be curious to wonder, could they assume that contract immediately if they were to, even just working off that 1.9 of free space, it's not accounted for any in season or other type of move. What's the data on the math on that?
I mean, Alec Pierce, he's still on his rookie deal, right?
Yeah,
so
they both are.
So $1.3 million in base salary is all you're dealing with him, and that's not even after displacement in the rule of 51. However that works, at whatever point you are with your 50, with your top 51, if you were to do something like that. So yeah, I mean, you could easily acquire. You could acquire both those guys if you wanted to, and not really move the number with him. With Treylon Burks, his 2024 base salary is just 1.567. He's got a roster. I don't know when the roster bonus, if the roster bonus with him is tied to post, closer to
usually it might be camp. Usually a couple days in camp, there's often a roster bonus that'll kick in for guys, right?
Yeah. So I mean, even with him, you're looking at $2 million roughly with the charge with him. But once again, once you get with the roster offset, you're not burning up that much. And then here's the thing about once the initial 53-man roster is set as well too, how much more are you going to use? A lot of time, let's face it, a lot of the guys that are in a rule of 51 right now, or not a lot, but a handful of guys in a rule of 51 right now are probably not going to make the 53-man roster, right?
I mean, I assume so. Who's kind of sitting at 49 and 50 and 51 right now in that rule of 51? Do you have a list of kind of the order?
Well, those are minimum guys. I'm talking about guys that would really kind of move the needle. What's going to happen with a DeMonte Casey? Yeah, we think he's going to make the roster right now, but could something materialize where maybe you say, you know what, we can get by without a DeMonte Casey in his situation. You look at let's see, who are some more middle of the road kind of guys here. What's going to happen with Montravius Adams? I mean, we think he obviously is going to make the roster, but I mean, would you go out and bet your house on it? Kind of situation. You have, a couple other guys that let's see, who else would be on that list?
I mean, are guys like Pruitt and Leal? I mean, those guys are they inside? I mean, Leal's inside the rule of 51, I assume, right?
Leal is inside the rule of 51 right now.
Pruitt?
Quez Watkins is.
Okay.
Pruitt is within the rule of 51. So you always have that kind of late, right before the season starts that, but on the flip side, are you going out and acquiring from other teams,
sure,
with guys with similar type salaries within that, that kind of late roster movement kind of stuff, probably half the time it requires another $1 million in cap space, and maybe the other half of times it frees up another $1.5 million in cap space. So it's hard to kind of predict. The thing that will really shift the needle at this point is what are you going to do with the Cam Hayward deal? Because obviously you can free up a lot of cap space if you do a no new money contract extension with him, and you give him a large signing bonus of his base salary as part of that. I mean, you can bring that cap number down. What have we talked about? $8-9 million. Roughly. It all depends on how much of that base salary you want to turn into a signing bonus when it comes to that, and what your goal is. I mean, do you really need to create the cap, a large amount of cap space, and if so, who for? Obviously, the Pat Freiermuth contract extension, even if it gets done the way I think it's going to get done, yeah, it's going to increase his cap number from where it sits right now, but it's not going to be huge. When you look at a guy like Najee Harris, quite honestly, if you did extend a guy like Najee Harris moving forward into this offseason, probably more than likely his cap number might come down, a little bit from where it sits right now. And at worst, it probably stays about the same, because right now where you sit, Najee Harris, his cap number for this season is $4.151 million. So, you could easily work around that and even decrease his cap number as part of the extension. So there's you at this point in the offseason, you could start, you could devise a path or a 5 different routes, if you will.
Sure.
That end up with different scenarios here as far as cap space goes. So I think the big takeaway right now is they're fine. I think the biggest question is will they get to a point where they have to restructure the contract of Minkah Fitzpatrick? I mean, that's the only thing that's really kind of significant. That, along with what a Cam Hayward extension would look like, that would impact future, the future cap numbers there. So it's hard to really guess on. If I was sitting here right now looking at where they sit right now, I would guess, especially when it doesn't seem as likely as they go out and get an outside wide receiver that would move the needle on things. I would guess right now that they would get to a point where they don't have to restructure the contract of Minkah right before the start of the season. But on the flip side, you could go 5 different ways with this thing, and you end up having to restructure his contract.
Sure, play it by ear, but Pittsburgh has some flexibility, some options right now, and that's a good place to be in salary cap wise. How much have you thought about a Najee extension, and in particular, what that would look like if I told you it was going to happen? I'm still pessimistic. It will occur. The precedent does not seem to be there, but hypothetically, if an extension were to occur before this year kicked off, what are we looking at from a year standpoint, from an average yearly value standpoint, a potential structure standpoint?
I would think that, you got to be careful with that for several reasons, obviously. And we've talked about, kind of what the average per year he's going to be shooting for. I don't think Najee touches this thing unless it makes him top 10,
Which would require what, 10 million per year?
No, I mean, you got it trickles down. What's going to happen with Alvin Kamara later this offseason?
I hadn't thought about it, to be honest with you.
I mean, he's second right now, $15 million per year. And then, obviously Jonathan Taylor is working on kind of a new deal at 14. You got, who all is signed this offseason? Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs. Both those guys are 12, right around the 12 million mark. Joe Mixon in his new digs right now is 9.8 million average yearly value. Obviously Derrick Henry switched teams is at 8 million. Man, you even got DeAndre Swift right now at 8 million new money average. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then Tony Pollard's ninth at 7.25. Aaron Jones, I think him and James Conner are 10th at 7 million. There's no, obviously you're not, Najee's probably not going to get into the 12 million range, right?
Yeah, but I think coming above, we had this conversation before, above Mixon at 10 million, I think it's a realistic goal for him to shoot for.
Right. I mean, to me, he would be kind of foolish at where he's at his age, the kind of what's expected from him moving forward. He'd be foolish to sign a deal for less than $10 million. Definitely, he's not going to do it for less than $8 million new money average. But, I think right around 10 million. So, let's say he comes in at 12 million. I mean, you're even on a 3-year deal, let's say this year and 2 more years on top of it, you're not going to move the needle much as far. For one thing, he's only going to get the guaranteed money in year 1, right?
Mm-hmm. You would assume so.
All right. Second, from what his cap number is right now and the way you could structure that thing, even on a 2-year extension on top of this year, you're not going to impact his cap number greatly. If anything, you should be able to keep his cap number the same.
Okay. Gotcha. So just curious on that again. I'm not expecting an extension to occur. I don't think you are, but just in case it did, what that would look like. I wanted to touch on that again.
Yeah, I mean, could it happen? Yes. Do I think it's going to happen? No. But I mean, if we're sitting here 2 weeks before the season and they announce, such a deal, I don't think anybody should be overly shocked at it, especially if he's willing to take, a number around anywhere between 8 and 12 million.
Yeah.
You could get it done. You would obviously you're not going to do an extension with Najee Harris, thinking in your head that, well, we can cut him. You want to make it where you can cut him after the 2024 season if things go absolutely south, but you don't go into that with the intentions of doing that. Obviously, you go in it with the intentions of him playing out the full contract. So you got to be careful there. You got to be careful with the cash money, with the guaranteed money, which obviously I think they would within that. But there could be an end result where both teams, where both sides get to a meeting point where it's beneficial for both sides. So I don't want to sit here and saying that, oh, there's absolutely no way that this happens. It's just, I'd be a bit surprised from where we sit right now.
Me as well. All right, Dave, good update there. Thank you for always keeping us in the loop in terms of where Pittsburgh is at financially. I know you'll update things after Zach Frazier signs, which you think will probably happen sometime this week, probably 8 minutes after we wrap up the podcast. I imagine Frazier will ink his rookie contract. The entire rookie class will have been signed. One Steelers adjacent piece of news coming out over the weekend. A lot of retirements on a pretty quiet Sunday overall for the NFL. Giants tight end Darren Waller retiring. He will not play against Pittsburgh when those two teams link up in week number 8. Former Steelers cornerback Steven Nelson retiring. He had a good year in Houston last year, 4 interceptions, a pick 6 to beat the Browns in the wild card round, but even at 31 years old, still can play, hanging up his cleats, moving on with life's work. He did not rule out potentially returning at some point, but for now in 2024, his intention is to retire and spend time with family.
Yeah, boy, it seemed like yesterday breaking down that Oregon State tape of Steven Nelson that year, and you turn around and here he is now. Looks like maybe he's played his last down in football. Obviously, things can change. I don't think he's going to rush out and file those retirement papers just yet. Trying to make out kind of the report that Aaron Wilson had on him there, but he's a minimum salary cornerback at this stage in his career, and I think he knows that. And just whether or not he finds the right situation, I don't want to rule out I don't want to rule out that he won't return, but he would be smart to probably keep his options open, because obviously injuries happen at this point of the offseason moving forward, and maybe he can get himself in a right situation where he gets an above minimum salary and has the opportunity to play a lot of snaps in 2024.
Yeah, I can see it. He started each of the last 2 years, been a full-time guy, 4 picks last year, 5 if you include the playoffs. So, obviously he's been a free agent this whole time. It speaks to a pretty light market overall, but I think he could get something. Somebody gets hurt in training camp. So we'll see. Would not expect him to come to Pittsburgh. I don't think he loved the way that his exit in Pittsburgh transpired. Unhappy about, the team tried to trade him. They weren't communicating with him the way that he hoped that they would, and then released him later than he would have liked, and took a while to find his new team. All worked out for Nelson in the end. Wish him well, but I think there's still some tension between him and Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's it feels like that's the case, the way it ended there.
All right, Dave, last thing I wanted to mention today, just to touch on it briefly, while the NFL is kind of in a more or less holding pattern, not a ton happening right now, there is still football on the field transpiring. The UFL is wrapping up their first season. That's the XFL, USFL merger that took place, taking 4 teams from each league. They had their conference championships this weekend. They'll hold their championship game next Sunday evening. And there's been a couple of former Steelers that have been thriving in this UFL team. There were 3 ex-Steelers who made the all UFL team in 2024. That was wide receiver Hakeem Butler, defensive tackle Carlos Davis, and tight end Jay Sternberger. So those 3 guys have had really successful seasons. And we've also gotten to watch Anthony McFarland, the former running back, 4th-round pick from Maryland. Quiet start to the year with the San Antonio Brahmas, but He's been able to pick things up and had a really big performance in their playoff win yesterday, 100 and something yards, 69-yard touchdown run, longest run by anyone in the UFL this year. So, it's a different league. It's a spring league, but he's kind of showing the speed and the playmaking ability that got him drafted. Didn't work out in Pittsburgh. I think McFarland will be in an NFL camp this year, not in Pittsburgh, but I think he'll be able to have a second chance in the NFL.
Yeah, and when is it, like the Monday after the championship game is played for that league is when these guys can sign NFL contracts, and there will be an influx of them. I would imagine this year. Will the Steelers have 1, 2, of those guys? It's possible. Look, Akeem Butler, man, that guy gets in these spring leagues and he rings it up. The common theme with him though still is the common theme, and that is he makes the tough catches look easy and he makes the easy catches look tough. But you look at his highlight reel. Just from this season alone with the UFL, it kind of matches what we've seen in these kind of previous seasons with him. And will Hakeem Butler land on a training camp roster later this summer? I think he will. Wade Phillips gave him a huge compliment after that game yesterday, saying, he's going to tell everybody he knows in the NFL he belongs on a team, and I think you'll see that. I think Anthony McFarland has done more than enough to get himself a chance in training camp with the team. There's probably, once again, you'll probably see, I don't know what the numbers end up being, but 20, 25 guys probably in UFL probably land, or maybe even more, land on training camp rosters.
Yeah, you'll definitely see some. Again, I think it hurts the way the league was constructed. It's later than what the XFL and I think USFL had last year, and so these guys have missed they'll miss all of OTA's mini camp and just be good for training camp, and only be a couple weeks removed from the end of their season before training camp comes along. So that's not a lot of time to rest and recover. Let me ask you this. Would you just, in your own personal opinion, not asking would the team do it or will they do it, but just would you have a preference to bring back any of those 4 ex-Steelers I mentioned, Butler, Sternberger, Davis, and McFarland?
At my core, probably not. The way this wide receiver room is right now, would it kill the team to sign Butler again and give him one last shot at a minimum contract? Probably. What was it last year? Some sort of, wasn't it around the start of preseason? Was it a hand injury or something with him?
I think it was very late in camp, but he had a really poor camp even before then. So it was him and Cody White got waived injured on the same day, but Butler was really struggling, just really couldn't separate. And then the last day of training camp had a couple of drops. I think he just kind of knew that this thing was going downhill. I think he had those drops and then got waived injured maybe the day after.
Let's see. He received an injury settlement. Hakeem did on September 2nd. Right. So
if that's what you're looking at.
Yeah. So didn't he? I'm trying to remember what the situation was. Didn't he play in the first preseason game against the Buccaneers or something?
I think so. He was waived injured August 21st.
Right. So he made it up until that point. But once again, it's a kind of the situation with him. Is he kind of is who he is at this point. He excels in these in the spring league against lower competition. The MO on him for forever has been he makes the tough catches look easy, makes the easy catches look tough. I don't think the stripes on the Tiger have changed much. So once again, if you want, would it be an upgrade over kind of the lowest receiver that you have on the 90-man roster right now? Yeah, potentially, but the reality is he probably wouldn't be anything more than a practice squad player.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah, I wouldn't bring Butler back for a second time. I think he'll be in a camp somewhere, just not in Pittsburgh, and hopefully a new team can be the right fit for him. Of those four, I consider bringing back Carlos Davis. I think he was a talented guy that flashed a little bit, had some athleticism, some burst to get upfield and penetrate. I don't know exactly what his biggest issue was. Was it run defense? Was it, above the neck type stuff? Just a numbers game? I know the D-line's got a bunch of names. They're all fighting for spots, but I'd take back Carlos Davis.
Yeah, they could do worse than that. But remember, really what was it? The game against the Cowboys?
Mm-hmm.
And was that his rookie season or second season?
I believe his rookie year. I think so.
That was the longest kind of, I think, extended look that we got out of him. And there was some pluses within that, but the fact that he really never progressed with him past then, once again, I think you're looking at a guy that's more than likely practice squad material at this point.
Well, sure. I think any UFL guy is going to be a borderline, just trying to keep their head above water if they're signed. I mean, I think they're all going to be in that type of situation. But of those four, I mean, I wouldn't bring back Butler, Sternberger. No, got a million tight ends already. McFarland, glad to see him doing well. Had a good camp last year. Just don't see the fit, don't see the role in this running back room. They've added a couple of veterans. They hadn't signed Jonathan Ward and LaMichael Pirine. Maybe you consider McFarland to get some experience and some depth in that room. But I think Davis of the four, I'm not saying they need to, but right. That's the most intriguing name of the 4X Steelers that we've just talked about.
Could he potentially push a guy, say like Montravius Adams, I guess, that group?
Yeah, I think Adams. Yeah, and just practice squad, possibility as well. So that's played in the NFL, and I think he was tied second or third in the UFL this year in sacks. So, I mean, he was able to get after it as a pass rusher some, which this team could use probably some more pass rushers, guys like Loudermilk and Lowry. They're really more rundown types. Lee Alves not shown his chops as a pass rusher. Logan Lee, I have questions about his ability to get after it in the passing game. So I think Davis is at least the most sensible and logical fit of those four.
Well, once again, he should be able to land a job somewhere around the NFL on a training camp roster.
Yeah, so just wanted to mention that because that is the football league that's playing actual football right now. Just one more game, and that'll be McFarland's team against the Birmingham Stallions. I don't know what Steelers are on the Stallions roster. It's probably a couple guys that's got a cup of coffee with a team. We'll talk about that next week. All right, Dave, that's all I had. If you have anything else, feel free. If not, we can get to some reader emails and close out today's show. Just a reminder as well, Dave and I will have our twice monthly Monday live stream tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
All right, let's see what we have here that has come in. Looks like really one from Mark. Writes in, I've been following the announcements of Steeler contracts and couldn't help but notice the focus on dollar amounts rather than percentages. With the increasing evolution in sports analytics, why do you think players, agents, and teams prioritize dollars over percentages? Do you believe there's a missed opportunity in not emphasizing the percentage of the cap occupied by contracts, especially considering its relevance to team building and long-term success? For instance, seeing a league-wide analysis of the percentage of the salary cap occupied by a wide receiver room compared to offensive performance could provide valuable insights, he writes. I don't think, Mark, I get the full gist of your question here. I will say this, though, when I think it's very dangerous to use percentage of salary cap for like I don't think a player should be judged by his salary cap number. You'll start seeing these reports. I mean, you've already seen them throughout the offseason, but you'll probably start seeing them more the closer that you get to the season. And boy, I took big issue with this, especially with the most recently the offensive line rooms of the Steelers the last couple of years, where people say, well, they only have X amount of cap space dedicated to the offensive line room. But even so, that came on like the heels of the Mason Cole signing, the signing of Daniels, the signing, let's say last year of Sayamalo, the signing last year of Herbig. You have to look at what each player cost you in cash for each season, and not their cap number, because cap numbers can be dictated by several different things. Did you just restructure a guy? Did you lower his cap number because of a restructure? And the cap number does not necessarily present a good reflection of what the player is actually worth. I think now, look, I've already have a post this past offseason looking at the Steelers wide receiver room from a cash perspective, and how low it is. And it would be interesting to see, I guess, and it would take a lot of digging to go back and look at, let's say, the last 5 years in teams and the success that a team has had when, let's say, their cash spending on a wide receiver room in a particular year has not been, let's say, top 10 matched across the league there. So I don't think my main takeaway, especially with your last sentence here, Mark, saying, for instance, seeing a league-wide analysis of the percentage of salary cap occupied by a wide receiver room compared to offensive performance, I think a better study within that would be how much technically do you have invested in cash. Cap number be damned. In a wide receiver room would be a better reflection of that, because once again, we, as most of you probably should know, cap numbers can be played with and manipulated and all like that. So maybe if you could probably spell out better. I mean, I get the gist of what you're trying to say here, but then on top of it too, players are worth what they're worth, as far as a cash investment goes. So he's saying here, is there a missed opportunity in not emphasizing the percentage of cap occupied by contracts, especially consider relevance? And I mean, I always think teams need to be wary of what they spend cash wise in, especially on both sides of the ball, man. If you look at the Steelers, if you to split the Steelers up right now, offense and defense alone, and look at the cash that they have invested in 2024 alone on a defensive side of football versus the offensive side of football, there's going to be a huge difference there, right? I mean, heck, your starting quarterback, you're paying $1.21 million in cash on, right? Mm-hmm. This year, you look at, who is your biggest cash investment right now? A guy like Sayamalo right now, and James Daniels when it comes to actual cash expenditures, because you got guys like Pickens still on a rookie contract. You got Roman Wilson on a rookie contract. You got Calvin Austin on a rookie contract. I mean, even your running back situation there with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, both those guys are technically still on their rookie contracts. You got Pat Freiermuth, who still at this point in time is still on his rookie contract there. There's going to be a huge difference in cash expenditure between the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball when it comes to the Steelers in that, just looking at it from a cash perspective there. So I get at the root what Mark's trying to say, but I will say that I would not look at this at salary cap percentage as much, because what's the Steelers? We already talked about potentially this team, doing some things with contracts like Minkah Fitzpatrick and all like that. I mean, even if you restructure the contract of Minkah this offseason, later in the offseason, it's not going to change the cash output per se for what you're giving him in cash, because all you're doing is turning a portion of that base salary into a signing bonus. You're still giving them that cash. The same with Cam Hayward. If you were to do a no new money restructure with or extension with Cam Hayward moving out the rest of this season, you're not going to change technically, the cash that you're giving them. However, if you were to give an extension to a guy like Pat Freiermuth, you're going to up the cash that he was previously scheduled to earn in 2024. So it gets into, we're going way down, holes that people don't don't like us talking about here. But I think at its whole, I think when you look at salaries and how teams are built and all like that, it's best to do it when looking at cash expenditures as opposed to salary cap expenditures, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well said. Obviously, this is more your wheelhouse than mine. But as you said, the way that you can manipulate the cap with restructures and moving money around makes it hard to get an accurate representation of what you're actually paying the player. And that's why cash is probably a better guide for that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else from the email machine, Dave?
No, nothing of relevance here. Obviously, this lull the offseason. And look, if you have any questions, we have a live stream later on tonight. YouTube bi-weekly live stream. You can find out on Alex Kozora's YouTube channel. I think we get started right at 7 Eastern time. PM, and we usually run right at an hour. Sometimes we run, 5-10 minutes over. So tonight would be a perfect opportunity if you have any questions that you want answered to get involved with that. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, mandatory mini camp gets underway this week here. We'll see what items we're talking about come Wednesday, and then obviously on the Friday show as well too. So in the meantime, unless you got anything else, Alex, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. If you want an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. And until Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.